ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਇਸ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਮੁਲਾਕਾਤ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਬਹੁਤ-ਬਹੁਤ ਸਵਾਗਤ। ਮੈਂ ਦਵਿੰਦਰ ਤੂਰ ਕੈਲਰੀ ਤੋਂ ਅਤੇ ਟੋਰਾਂਟੋ ਤੋਂ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਜਾਣੀ-ਮਾਣੀ ਸ਼ਖਸੀਅਤ ਸਾਡੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਕਾਮਯਾਬ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਜੇਸਨ ਕੈਨੀ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜਨਗੇ। ਸੋ ਆਓ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰੀਏ। ਮਿਸਟਰ ਕੈਨੀ, ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ very much for joining us today.
Sat Sri Akal and Namaste. Thank you very much, Devinder. It's great to be on your show for the first time.
That's great. So let's start from one of the main question about the election campaign. We all know this is the longest election campaign we had it. How are you enjoying so far?
A great deal, actually. I'm having fun. I've been out doing dozens of events every week across the country, mainly in the Vancouver and Toronto regions. And of course, because I am the main liaison of the Conservative Party and the Minister for Multiculturalism in the government with multicultural and ethnic communities, most of my time is spent with our cultural, ethnic, and immigrant communities, and I'm finding tremendous support. I think people, people who immigrate to Canada do so because they want prosperity, they want opportunity, they want their hard work to be rewarded. They tend to be entrepreneurs, and for all of those reasons, they're very focused on economic growth and stability, which is the message and record of our Conservative government. But I also am finding that people, particularly in the South Asian community, are broadly very happy with the ambitious immigration reforms that we've made to clean up a lot of problems that were in our system, to make it work faster, to increase the level of immigration and family reunification, to bring in the super visa, all of which has had some very positive results, including far more visitors coming from India in general and Punjab in particular. So I'm getting a very positive response out there. I don't know about the rest of the campaign will be interesting, but I can tell you I think the vast majority of new Canadians will, in my judgment, be voting Conservative.
So when we talk about you, we all know that you are a minister capable of everything. You can manage any department. How do you feel about that?
Well, I'm a hard worker, Devinder. I probably inherited that from my mom, who is always a good example of hard work. And I believe when you're given a task, you have to do everything you can and be creative and learn quickly and be willing to take risks. That's what I did in reforming the immigration system, in cleaning up the problems in the temporary foreign worker program and the employment ministry. That's what I've tried to do in promoting integration in multiculturalism and in dealing with some difficult issues in the Department of Defense. So I enjoy the fact that I have had different experiences in government. It's very enriching, and I'm glad to have the Prime Minister's confidence to have some important responsibilities.
Mr. Kenney, we all also know that you are very outspoken. Lately, you made a comment against Mr. Trudeau, basically showing us that he's pretty much similar to his father, Pierre Trudeau, and reminded us about the National Energy Program. Mr. Trudeau already said that it was a mistake. Don't you buy this comment from him?
No, to the contrary. Justin Trudeau has said he wants to impose a carbon tax on the Canadian economy, which would increase the cost of everything, of all goods and services. It would have a devastating impact on the transportation sector, in which many Canadians of Punjabi origin are employed, and it would obviously massively disadvantage and hurt our energy sector in Alberta and Western Canada, which is already hurting from a 60% decline in global oil prices. So Mr. Trudeau has said and made it clear in the leaders' debate recently that he arbitrarily opposes certain pipelines. Well, Canada is losing tens of billions of dollars a year in the value of our oil products because we cannot sell them on the global market. We have a captive. We're a captive supplier. We can only sell our oil right now to the United States. And Mr. Trudeau has said he's opposed to getting our oil to the West Coast. He's uncertain about getting it to our East Coast. But if we could get our oil products to our coasts in an environmentally responsible way, that would massively increase the price that we get for our oil. And that would mean billions of dollars of additional revenue for governments that build schools, hospitals, and provide other social programs. So I think he is completely wrong about this. I think he's ideologically opposed to our energy industry, like Mr. Mulcair. And I'm just saying that we shouldn't forget what Pierre Trudeau did in the early 1980s. Now, many of your viewers may not have been in Canada back in 1982, but people who lived in Alberta there remember that the economy went into a deep depression because of the Trudeau National Energy Program, and I think we shouldn't forget that.
When it comes to Tom Mulcair, few of their candidates made some remarks about the oil industry, that they want to shut down the oil industry by keeping the oil underground. How do you feel that way?
Yeah, exactly. I think actually the New Democratic Party is even more extreme on this issue. You know, Devinder, I don't think we as Canadians should regard the fact that we have the world's second largest oil reserves as a problem. I think we should regard it as a great opportunity, as representing enormous wealth that creates huge numbers of good paying jobs, not just in Alberta, but right across the country. The projection made by expert economists is that by the year 2028, the oil sands could be responsible for the creation of 800,000 jobs, typically high-paying jobs, and will be responsible for paying over $1 trillion in taxes and royalties. Imagine all of the future hospitals and schools and other social benefits that we can derive from that wealth. Now, obviously, Devinder, we need to produce and export and transport our oil and gas in an environmentally responsible way. But I can tell you, and any expert will admit, that Canada already has the most stringent, the strictest regulations for oil and gas and pipelines of any country in the world. It's one of the reasons why operating in the oil sands and in the Canadian energy sector is more expensive than in any other country, because we're a northern cold climate, which means they can't operate part of the year, but also because of the very stringent regulatory burden. So when the NDP and some Liberals say that we should keep, quotes, keep the oil in the ground, and that we should not be able to export it to get a fair price at the world markets, what they're really saying is that we should impoverish ourselves, that we should kill hundreds of thousands of jobs and lock in the ground wealth that represents trillions of dollars. Now, Devinder, the people who say this do so because they are ideologically opposed to oil and gas. I believe we need to be environmentally responsible and pursue alternative renewable sources of energy. But as long as as international technology operates largely on the basis of oil and gas consumption, why shouldn't Canada be benefiting from the economic opportunities? Why should we leave it to Saudi Arabia and Venezuela and Nigeria and Qatar and Iran and other countries like that to produce and sell all of the oil? Those countries have lower environmental standards, much lower labor standards, and many of them have no respect for human rights. Canada is the most environmentally responsible and ethical major producer of oil and gas. And Devinder, unlike the NDP, I think we should celebrate that and embrace it, not be embarrassed about it and try to shut it down.
When it comes to economy, this is the number one issue in this election campaign. We had some leaders from NDP and Liberal Party, and they blame present government for the economic crisis. They say running 8 state deficits, we cannot believe in Conservative Party of Canada anymore. How you will respond to that?
Well, Canada has had the best economic record in the developed world since the big global economic downturn in 2008 and 9. First of all, we had one of the shortest and shallowest recessions at that time. It was a recession that started because of the mortgage crisis in the United States and then spread outward and eventually impacted Canada. But since the 2009 global recession, we have had the best record of economic growth in the G7, one of the best in the G20, the 20 largest developed economies. We have been one of only 2 G20 countries to balance its federal budget. We have one of the lowest levels of federal debt of any developed country in the world. We have, according to the World Economic Forum, the most secure financial institutions and banks in the world. According to Forbes magazine, Canada is now the best country in the world in which to start a new business. According to the New York Times, we have the wealthiest middle class, the highest median income of any country in the world. Poverty, the percentage of Canadians living below the low-income line, is at its lowest level ever. Federal taxes are at their lowest level since the 1950s as a share of our economy. And we've had one of the best job creation records in the developed world, with the creation of over 1.2 million net new jobs since the 2009 global recession. So altogether, Devinder, I believe that is a very strong record. Now, it's true that right now we are facing some challenges, partly because of the huge decline in oil prices and the impact that has on the 5 to 10% of our economy that is tied to the oil and gas industry. So there is a sectoral downturn, which is affecting Alberta and Saskatchewan in particular, but other sectors continue to grow. And Devinder, the most important thing is what would the other parties do? They would massively increase spending, increase deficits, increase debt, and increase taxes, and increase regulations on business, all of which impedes economic growth. Our approach instead has been to cut taxes, to encourage investment, to reward entrepreneurship and hard work, and to open up more international markets for our exports. We are an exporting economy. This is why our government has successfully negotiated 45 free trade agreements around the world. When we came to office, Canada had only 4 such free trade agreements. We now hope to sign in the near future the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which will give us basically tariff-free access to 40% of the world's economy. We are negotiating a free trade agreement with India. So you take all of that together, and I think our approach, fiscal discipline, low taxes, focused on private sector economic growth, is the best way to insulate us from international shocks like the decline in oil prices.
Last year, we got the record number of immigrants came to Canada, despite the fact the opposition parties are blaming you that you brought a lot of hardship rules to the immigration, which are going to compromise the social values of immigration, like putting the cap on parental sponsorship, which is the main part of immigration, that you put a cap of $5,000, 5,000 numbers, which can be fulfilled just in one day. How would you respond to that? Why not take out the cap and leave it open?
Well, first of all, Devinder, overall, our government has increased immigration to Canada very significantly since we came to office. We have had the highest sustained levels of immigration in our history. For example, I don't know if you can see this, but in the 10 years of our government, we have admitted 2.6 million permanent residents. That's the equivalent of the population of all 4 Atlantic provinces. That compares to under 2.2 million permanent residents admitted by the Liberal government in the previous decade. So you can see about a 20% increase in immigration under our government, and that's also true for India. In fact, our government on average has admitted 30,000 immigrants from India every year, compared to 25,000 under the previous Liberal government. And we've also, part of that has been increasing family immigration. When the previous Liberal government was in office, in their first 5 years, they cut family reunification by 45%. We increased it by 25%. And with respect to family reunification overall, under the previous Liberal government, the average number of family class immigrants admitted was 60,000, and it's been 66,000 per year on average under our government. So we've actually increased family reunification by about 20%. This notion of the 5,000 person cap on parents and grandparents, let's be clear, Devinder, when we came to office, there were 108,000 parents and grandparents applications in the queue, taking up to 7 or 8 years to process. And that's because every year the country, Canada, was getting far, far more applications for parents than there was space in our immigration plan. We have to limit every category of immigration, obviously, because we have an overall limit. And what our government did was three things. First, we increased the number of parents and grandparents getting permanent residency every year. we went from about 17,000 to about 22,000 parents and grandparents getting permanent residency, and that continues to this day. The 5,000 is the limit on the number of applications that we will receive, because we have to reduce the backlog so that we go from 8-year wait times to like 1-year wait times eventually. We've succeeded in cutting that backlog of parents' applications in half. That was so the first thing we did was increase the number of parents and grandparents admitted as permanent residents. The second thing was to manage the intake of new applications, because Devinder, I could take the limit off that to 5,000, and immediately we would start receiving 50,000, 60,000 applications for parents and grandparents every year, but they would just go to the back of a queue, and they would end up waiting for 10 and 15 and then 20 years. That doesn't do anyone any favors. So we're being much more honest by managing the intake of applications. The third thing we did was, of course, to bring in the super visa, which has been hugely popular. And I can tell you that we've issued 50,000 super visas. I believe 12,000 of them have gone to residents of Punjab alone, with a processing period of 50 days and an 89% acceptance rate. So under the previous government, you could get in a queue and wait for upwards of a decade to get permanent residency for your parents. Or under this system, you can get in the queue, get faster permanent residency, or go through the super visa and get it in a couple of months. I think it's a much better system. Long story short, Devinder, if you add the number of parents and grandparents getting permanent residency under our government each year, that's about 22,000, on top of the 20,000 getting super visas, we're talking about over 40,000 parents and grandparents coming to Canada every year, more than twice of what was the case before.
Mr. Kenney, I think internationally politicians come to Canada and they play their own politics. Lately, you criticize Punjabi politicians coming to Canada and creating chaos. Why did you say that?
Well, I'll tell you, Devinder, we're an open and free country, and visitors to our country have the right of freedom of speech. They can express their opinions. We don't police what they say. But if foreign politicians come to Canada claiming to be on a personal visit, and they then begin engaging in foreign electoral politics in Canada, I think that's an abuse of our hospitality. I just reminded certain representatives of the Akali Dal, a political party in Punjab, that perhaps they should focus their political efforts in their own region, in their own country. I said that instead of them criticizing Canada or the Canadian police or anything about this wonderful country, perhaps instead they should focus on the serious problems that exist in Punjab, like the epidemic of narcotics and illegal drugs, like the problem of corruption, like economic growth in their own country. Devinder, I've visited India several times. When I go there, I visit my Indian and Punjabi and other state-level government counterparts. We talk about bilateral issues, we talk about trade, I might visit some cultural sites. But Devinder, what I don't do is go and campaign for my political party in Punjab. I think that would be inappropriate. And I would ask Indian politicians to show the same kind of respect that we do when we're visiting India.
But when they blame Canadian politicians to go to Punjab and having same kind of politics there too, so what do you say to those Canadian politicians?
Well, this is exactly my point. Canadian politicians go and visit India. I mean, obviously, some of our Punjabi, our members of Parliament of Punjabi or Indian origin maybe go back and visit family for personal reasons, but by and large, when we go back, we're dealing with government-to-government relations. I can tell you, these guys who were visiting us from the Akali Dal, none of them asked for any meetings with me or with Government of Canada officials. They weren't engaged in an official bilateral visit. They were here for one purpose, which was to campaign for their political party. I've never gone to India, and I don't know, and none of my colleagues have, and stood up in front of a banner for the Conservative Party of Canada and told Canadians in India who to vote for. That's not what we do. We would encourage them to focus on bilateral relations with Canada and to focus on Indian politics in India.
Do they have diplomatic immunity to have a political campaign here, or they just come on a visitor visas?
They must come on a visitor visa. Devinder, a few years ago, we created a new rule to say that foreign countries are not permitted to organize foreign election campaigns in Canada. We had some countries, not India, but some European countries, for example, that have created overseas constituencies in their parliaments amongst Canadians, and they would actually have open campaigns. And we said, you know, this is inappropriate, and we will not permit open campaigning in Canada. And I think what these guys from the Akali Dal were doing was dangerously close to crossing the line of our prohibition on overseas campaigning in Canada.
When we see like temporary foreign worker programs, you took care about this program for almost 6 years, and NDP is saying that you are responsible for all the mess of temporary foreign workers. They also told you that you are capable of handling it, but they are also blaming you for the mess. But my question to you is, why not create a stream for lower skilled workers, because there's no stream for lower skilled workers under the temporary foreign workers to gain permanent residence in Canada?
Yes. Well, I'll tell you why, Devinder. First of all, the temporary foreign worker program, in my judgment, should only be a last and limited resort. What we're telling Canadian employers is that they must do everything possible to hire, recruit, and train and accommodate Canadian workers before seeking the last resort of bringing people in from abroad. You know, Devinder, your namesake, Devinder Shori, my colleague for MP for Calgary Northeast, told me that his own niece, who is a very bright girl, had top grades in high school, went out to several Tim Hortons franchises in Northeast Calgary, dropped off her resume, and applied for jobs to work in Tim Hortons, and that she never got a call back, she never got a job offer, but noticed that there were apparently a number of temporary foreign workers in those stores. That's the kind of thing we have to avoid. What we're telling employers is if they are having difficulty finding local staff, then maybe they should be raising their wage rates or improving benefits or working conditions or offering more flexible hours. Maybe they should be focusing on recruitment amongst many of the newest Canadians, the most recent immigrants who have a high unemployment rate. Maybe they should be focusing on youth who have a relatively high unemployment rate, or on Canadians with disabilities to help train them and accommodate them in the workforce before going abroad. Devinder, the problem with accommodating so-called low-skilled workers is that often that displaces Canadians who are the most marginal in the workforce, like disabled people, Aboriginals, newest immigrants, and many of our youngest workers. We need to protect access to that entry-level job, that modestly skilled entry-level job for many Canadians who are otherwise at the margins of the labor market. And let me tell you, Devinder, I know very well that many, in Alberta in particular, many employers became dependent on the temporary foreign worker program because they would bring people in from abroad who are not burdened by family obligations in Canada. They're here by themselves, and they are desperate to stay as long as they can in the often faint hope that they can translate their work permit into permanent residency, and they'll do whatever is asked of them. They'll work extra hours, they'll take extra shifts, they'll come in early, they'll leave late. And I think what we ended up seeing was a distortion in the Alberta labor market, particularly in the hospitality sector, where wages ended up being suppressed. Supposedly, if there's a labor scarcity, if they couldn't find enough workers, then wages should have been going up to reflect that scarcity, but instead wages were stagnating because of so many temporary foreign workers. So that's why I think we have to be limited in the number of low-skilled. Now, if there are high-skilled positions where there is clearly a shortage of Canadians, and the only way to do that work is to bring people in from abroad on work permits, then we permit that within certain constraints.
Well, if there's a shortage in low-skill wages jobs, then will you allow that or not?
Up to a very constrained limit. So this year, in 2015, employers may only have up to 20% of their workforce in low-skilled jobs as temporary foreign workers. Next year, the cap goes down to 10%. So they can only have 10% of low-skilled positions filled by temporary foreign workers. So we are still permitting some, but a very tight cap.
Mr. Kenney, is that true that you made a comment that Irish immigrants are most compatible to the cultural values of Canada, and also in the work holiday program, you raised the cap from 1,000 to 10,000 from people coming from Ireland, despite the fact that we got only 5,000 from Europe, few thousand from Asia, and under 5,000 from Australia?
No, I didn't say that. I was on an interview in Ireland, and I said that many employers tell me that they like hiring workers from Ireland because they're compatible in the Canadian workforce, by which I meant that their training and skill level is at the same as in Canada. That is to say, an Irish welder can quickly and easily get his ticket in Canada, for example, and of course they speak English, and their education system is very similar. So I was saying that's what Canadian employers tell me. The truth, yes, we did increase the allotment for a number of countries in the what's called International Experience Canada, or the Youth Mobility Program, although we've now capped that, and we've told those countries that we expect to see reciprocity. We want to see more Canadians going to those countries with whom we have these arrangements, so there's a balance. It's supposed to be a youth exchange on both sides. But in terms of the accusation, the ridiculous accusation that we are somehow privileging Irish immigration, you know, all of Europe represents less than 10% of immigration to Canada. Asia represents 50%. I think on average in the past decade, we've had like around 500 Irish immigrants a year, as opposed to, for example, 30,000 from India. So anyone who thinks that we've privileged immigration from a particular country is not familiar with the statistics.
As a defense minister, I think you know that we are involved in Ukraine and Russia's dispute. There was a neo-Nazi training camp going on, and US blocked that. What is our position as a Canada, as a defense minister? What do you say? Should we allow those neo-Nazi training camps or not?
No, they're not. We're not doing that. First of all, let's not exaggerate the issue. There are hundreds of thousands of people in the Ukrainian military fighting for their country's independence against Vladimir Putin's invasion. And I believe that one battalion, one particular company of a battalion, that is to say a couple of hundred people, might be described as having extreme right views, and we will not be training them. We are deploying 200 Canadian military trainers to Western Ukraine, working with the United States, as well as a similar operation from the British Army to help provide greater capability, professionalism to the Ukrainian military. But we will not be accepting or training people outside the regular Ukrainian army or those who hold such extreme views.
Bill C-43 and Bill C-51, you think they're too hard to take away the fairness and compatibility values of immigration?
Oh no, to the contrary. I think new Canadians place great value on their citizenship, when that's what Bill C-24, the Strengthening Canadian Citizenship Act, does. You know, when I became Minister of Immigration, Devinder, I was quite shocked to find that there were a large number of fraudulent applications, people who had rarely or never lived in Canada but hired immigration consultants to create fake proof of their residency here. People who were getting 20 out of 20 on the citizenship test but couldn't speak a sentence of English, who didn't meet the basic English language or French language proficiency requirements, and other kinds of abuse. So what we said was Canada will continue to be the most open and generous country in the world, but we actually want to have at least some reasonable basic requirements for people obtaining Canadian citizenship. Now, one of those new provisions in the law is that we can now, once again, as we could up until 1977, revoke Canadian citizenship from convicted terrorists if they have multiple nationalities. And I think, you know, virtually every other democratic country in the world has a similar power. Our view, and I think the view of the overwhelming majority of Canadians, is that if someone joins an illegal terrorist organization like the so-called Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, an organization involved in genocide, by the way, in mass sexual slavery of women and girls as young as the age of 8, an organization that crucifies and beheads its opponents, even children. If they go and join such an organization that has declared hostility to Canada, they are violently, through their own actions, renouncing their Canadian citizenship. I mean, we have videos, you can look it up on YouTube, we have videos of radicalized young Canadians traveling to Syria to join this genocidal criminal terrorist organization and burning their passports on video and then shooting their Canadian passports with their machine guns. Devinder, I believe someone that does something like that is telling us, they're sending us a message through their actions, which is that they reject and renounce their Canadian citizenship, and I think we should take them at their word and revoke it from them. Of course, all of this will be overseen by the courts. There's a fear campaign out there, Devinder, some suggesting from my opponents in the Liberal and NDP parties that we would revoke citizenship from people convicted of ordinary crimes. That's completely ridiculous. That would be unconstitutional. We have no reason to seek to do that. And these revocations could only happen with judicial supervision by the courts.
Lately, Mr. Harper said there can be a travel ban on those countries who basically harbor the terrorists and put training camps for the terrorists. The country like Syria, Iraq, they can be those countries. But for example, Pakistan, which we all know has a lot of training camps for the terrorists. So you think we can put a travel ban in Pakistan in future too if they don't stop helping terrorists?
The intention is to put a travel ban on areas that are under the control of terrorist organizations. So I do not foresee the imposition of such a travel ban on a country like Pakistan. Obviously, Pakistan has very serious problems with respect to terrorism, but the terrorists do not control entire regions in the same way that they do in the ISIL controls territory in Iraq and Syria. Now, it's conceivable that you could take, that part of northern Nigeria, for example, where Boko Haram, an ISIL-linked organization, is in control of territory, and add that to the list. But it would be discrete areas under control of a terrorist organization.
Mr. Kenney, you introduced a bill to limit the refugees who has the health problems like trauma, which was actually, I think, brought back by the Supreme Court. Will you introduce such a bill again?
Well, it wasn't actually a bill. It was a policy which said that failed bogus asylum claimants will not receive supplementary health benefits. I think it's ridiculous that we were actually giving better health benefits, including extended care benefits, supplementary benefits, dental, pharmaceutical, ophthalmological benefits to people coming from democratic European countries, for example, making fake asylum claims while they were delaying their removal from Canada. Devinder, we are a generous country, but there should be some practical limits to our generosity. We should not actually give people benefits if they are abusing the generosity of our asylum system. Now, for bona fide refugees who come here, and the vast majority who come from countries around the world continue to have access to federally funded interim health benefits, and they get those benefits after until they get their permanent residency, in which case they go on to the provincial health plans.
Mr. Kenney, tell us something about yourself which we don't know about you.
Well, I don't know what you don't know, Devinder. I guess I would, let me think. I've been in, one thing I think is interesting about my perspective is that I had 9 years in opposition in Parliament and now 9 years in government. So I think I see things from a pretty balanced perspective. I understand the job that opposition has to keep government accountable. I guess another thing is that I have a real, this is a personal thing, but a very deep interest in India as a culture and as a civilization. And I'm always completely taken away by the kind of exotic diversity of India. And I would hope at some point in my life I can spend an extended period of time visiting that country.
Mr. Kenney, are you the person who may be the future of the Conservative Party of Canada?
Well, the future of our party at this time is Stephen Harper. He's experienced, he has proven leadership, he's respected on the global stage, he's kept our economy stronger than most developed countries, and so he has my unqualified support. And I don't think about the long-term future in these things because I've got too many jobs as it is, Devinder, to keep me busy.
At last, what do you want to tell our listeners? What message you want to send?
Well, there's one particular thing I wanted to share that I didn't get a chance to before, and that is that in part because of our successful immigration reforms, cracking down on crooked immigration agents here and abroad, cracking down on immigration marriage fraud, human smuggling, and so forth, and because of our efforts to educate people about how to comply with our fair rules, as a result of all of that, we have seen a very significant increase in the number of visitors coming to Canada from India and more specifically from Punjab. So you can see that back in 2005, about 90,000 visitors came to Canada from India, but last year 153,000 visitor visas were issued to Indian nationals, and that is even larger for those coming from Punjab, who have made applications for visitor visas out of our office in Chandakar. Back under the Liberals in 2005, 6,400 visitor visas were issued to Punjabi residents to visit Canada. Last year, 20,000 were issued, and in the first 12 months, in the first 6 months of this year, 2015, over 12,000 visitor visas have been issued to Punjabis. So we're on track for probably 24,000 visitor visas this year. That is a quadrupling, a 400% increase in the number of visitor visas issued. We've also seen that the approval percentage of applications approved has almost doubled. So what I wanted to leave you and your viewers with, Devinder, is an appreciation that this is the result of our immigration reforms. By cracking down on fraud and by cleaning up the system, by educating people about our immigration laws, we have been able to give much better service, a 400% increase in the number of visitor visas to Punjabis being issued, in addition to the 12,000 parental super visas. So the system is not perfect. We need to continue to work at it, but it's a whole lot better than the system that we inherited a decade ago, and I'm very proud of that. And I'll tell you, Devinder, everywhere I go, to Nagar Kirtans, to chat parties at people's homes, to all across the country, South Asian Canadians, Punjabi Canadians are coming up and thanking me for the positive differences that this has made.
Mr. Kenney, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for the great conversation. I appreciate your time and interest, Devinder. All the best.
Thank you.